Scaling Up Nation, are you looking for precise liquid level monitoring? Pyxis Labs' new radar level sensor series has you covered. With accurate monitoring up to 50 feet and wireless Bluetooth configuration via the Pyxis app, our sensors offer unparalleled convenience. Plus, LoRa technology enables long-range data acquisition. Experience the future of level monitoring today. Water professionals deserve better tools, and Pyxis Lab delivers. Go to scalinguph2o.com/Pyxis. Once again, that's scalinguph2o.com/PYXIS. Pyxis, because water professionals deserve better. Scaling Up Nation, Trace Blackmore here with some mind-blowing news that'll make your job a whole lot easier. 3 industry titans, Masters Company, Radical Polymers, and MFG Chemical have joined forces to create your ultimate one-stop shop for your water treatment needs. We're talking over 60 years of Masters Company's expertise in private label products and cutting-edge test kits. Radical Polymers' game-changing Inisha additives, and MFG Chemical's custom manufacturing prowess. These American companies are bringing you top-notch quality and reliability all under one umbrella. From blending and ultra-concentrates to specialized polymers and custom solutions, they've got you covered. And with multiple AWT Supplier of the Year awards between them, you know you're getting the best of the best. Ready to revolutionize your water treatment game? Head over to scalinguph2o.com/MFG. Once again, that's scalinguph2o.com/MFG. Trust me, you'll be glad you did. Welcome to the Scaling Up H2O podcast, the podcast where we scale up on knowledge so we don't scale up our systems. I'm Trace Blackmore, the host of the Scaling Up H2O podcast, and Nation, happy 4th of July. I thought today was going to be a cool episode because it is actually dropping on the 4th of July. And since we have had this podcast, that has only happened once before, and I wanted to take advantage of that. So Nation, happy July 4th. Of course, if you are in the States with me, you know that this is one of our nation's biggest holidays. We take the day off. We celebrate our great country becoming a nation. If you are not in the United States, you probably know that this is a big holiday for the United States. And that is what we are celebrating today. And Nation, I love July 4th. I love it because it's during the summer. And if it doesn't rain, there's just so much you can do. Now, the number one thing that people do on July 4th, yes, you guessed it, is watching fireworks. And the most consumed fireworks worldwide takes place on July 4th. And people just enjoy celebrating with fireworks. So here's a question I have for you. Do you like doing your own fireworks, going to purchase them on your own, and then launching them with your friends and neighbors? Or do you prefer going somewhere where you can watch a professionally put on show of fireworks? Well, if you were to ask me that question, I will tell you, hands down, I love going to professional shows. One of my good friends actually designs and puts on fireworks shows, and it is amazing all the things that they do. And everything is done through a computer. Everything has a program. It's set to music. Everything has a specific timeline that it goes off. And he's shown me how he programs that, how he sets up all of these different launchers to make sure things are going off at the right time. And it really is amazing. So I have a new appreciation for professional fireworks because he shared all of this stuff with me and actually brought me into his world I got to see him perform a show one night, and there was just so much that went into it. So I appreciate it that way, but I just love going to a venue and just watching this professional show. Now, what I don't like is the traffic when you leave. Now, there's a place that's not too far from my home where we can actually watch them in a non-trafficky area, and I live in Atlanta. And I know what you're saying, Trace, does that exist? Is there a non-trafficky area in Atlanta? That doesn't exist. Yeah, you're probably right, but some are better than others. And the place that we go is a little bit better than others, but that is the number one thing that people do on July 4th. Now, the second number, so I guess this number two thing would be having cookouts. So the most barbecues take place on July 4th weekend, and I love doing that as well. I am a barbecue person, so any chance for me to get the smoker out, to get the grill out, I am all over that. And then, of course, there are community parades. There's a great one that our city does. And I live on a city that's a little bit north of Atlanta, a little bit smaller. And they actually do a fallen hero parade. And they have this enormous parade, and people actually carry signs to represent the people that have fallen in battle, people that have actually helped us enjoy the freedom that we do have here in the United States. So what do you do on July 4th? Because today is July 4th. I hope you are going to make the most of it. I hope you have fun. And with all the things that are going on politically, we of course have all these different sides to all these different issues. I want us to take today to remember that we have more in common than we do have in differences. And it just seems like, especially of late, that we spend a lot more time looking at our differences than what we have in common. And it's my hope that today we can set that aside and realize that we are celebrating an amazing country. For those of us that are in the United States, such a privilege to be here. And I hope that we remember that. So as you are celebrating the holiday, I'm also hoping that you're looking for different conferences to go to so you can increase your knowledge about this amazing field that we are in. Something you might want to check out is the third annual Water Efficiency and Conservation Symposium that is taking place in Chicago, Illinois, August 6th through 8th, and it is hosted by the Alliance for Water Efficiency. We're going to have all the information about this show if you want to find out more by going to scalinguph2o.com, going over to our events section. And while you're there, check out WEFTech 2025. Now, this is a huge show. So many of our listeners go to it. This is also taking place in Chicago, Illinois, September 27th through October 1st. And WEFTech is the largest annual water quality exhibition in North America. So be sure to check that out on our events page. And so many of our listeners attend WEFTech. Now, taking place August 7th through 9th in Reno, Nevada, is the Water Smart Innovations Conference. This is put on by the American Water Works Association. And this is a conference that brings together all people in the water industry to talk about new innovations and how we can support sustainability. So we're, of course, are going to have all of that information on our events page. And of course, there's going to be so much more on the events page. I only have the opportunity to talk about a few on each and every show. However, I urge you that when you get a chance, you look at the events page on the Scaling Up H2O website, because you might find that there is a conference that is somewhere you can drive to, and you might meet somebody there that might change everything. You might get an idea there that might change everything. You might get an answer to that issue that you just don't know how to solve. Or You might even get an answer to an issue you haven't even discovered yet. Folks, when you go to these conferences and you start meeting people, you start listening to the papers, you start getting new ideas, that is where we might get a spark that allows us to become better than where we are right now. And that, of course, is the goal for each and every day. How do I make today better than yesterday? And going to some of these conferences is a great way to do that. We've made it really easy by going to scalinguph2o.com and going over to our events page. Somebody else who's made it very easy for us to keep learning week after week in a very fun way is our friend James McDonald. And here is a brand new What Do You Know?
Hello and welcome to What Do You Know? The game show where we find out what do you know about industrial water treatment, drop by drop. So pump up your brain, take out that test kit of knowledge, and prepare to answer this week's question on What Do You Know? Today's question is, how many parts per million of sodium sulfite does it take to react with 1 part per million of oxygen? The theoretical ratio is 7.88 parts per million of chemically pure sodium sulfite to react with 1 part per million of dissolved oxygen. In practice, approximately 10 ppm of sodium sulfite are required for each ppm of oxygen. This accounts for the use of technical-grade sodium sulfite, as well as handling and blowdown losses encountered during plant operation. Note that sodium bisulfite and sodium metabisulfite have different ratios. I'm James McDonald, and thanks for playing along with us. Stay tuned for next week's episode of What Do You Know?
Well, thank you, James. Last week, Nation, I told you I was going to do something a little bit different today. So we have our regular interview, and then right after that interview, I am going to read to you Patrick Henry's famous speech, "Give me liberty or give me death." And I'm willing to bet almost everybody that is listening to this podcast has heard the last line of that speech, "Give me liberty or give me death." I'm willing to bet most of us have not heard that speech in its entirety, and that's why I want to read that to you today. But before I do that, here's our interview. My lab partner today is Jack Clark of 180 Water. Jack, welcome to the Scaling Up H2O podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Well, I want to make sure the Scaling Up Nation knows who we're speaking to today. So do you mind telling us a bit about yourself?
Yeah, so I'm Jack Clark. I was born and raised in Montana, and I started the Water Well Company about 10 years ago, and we franchised about a year ago. We opened 5 locations kind of across Montana and North Dakota, and now we're starting to push into Wyoming and Idaho and some other regions. So, that's kind of my background is got started in the water well industry, grew up on a ranch, and, the ranch became too small. And so I needed to branch out a little bit. And so I found myself in the water well industry. Yeah. So that's kind of how I got my start.
I'm curious, how did you get involved in water well?
So my neighbor growing up was actually a water well driller. And so, when you're out there working Saturdays on the ranch and you look across the fence and the rigs are parked and the guy's out there putting along in his shop doing his hobby stuff, you get a little jealous. And so I always had an interest in the water well industry and Ray was a big influence on that. And so it kind of transitioned pretty well from ranching. You wake up, you do your chores, you get the rig ready, you check your stuff, you go drill a hole, you come back, you know what I mean? So it's very easy to transition.
I've always been interested in the science behind well drilling. You assume that if you dig deep enough, you're going to find water, but I'm sure that there's a lot more science to that. You know where different sources are, how deep they're going to be, whether it's actually feasible to go and get the water. How do you figure out when somebody says, "Hey, I need a well drilled," what you're going to do next, and can you actually do that?
Yeah, so what we do is we actually witch every well, which is really old school. But what we do is we find a water well vein with a brazing rod is typically what we use, or a willow stick, which is really old school, which is common for the water well industry to be old school. But then we follow that, and then we find another vein, and where they cross is where we like to drill wells. And then there's obviously aquifer maps and things like that too. But like where we're at here in the mountains of Montana, there might not necessarily be a lake that is an aquifer underground. We're more chasing cracks in the rock or different formation changes that might hold water. And so there's not a perfect science to it. And so a lot of times what we'll do is we'll do more dry hole raids and some other things to hopefully spread out that risk for our client. But with drilling, there is always risk.
So we're using water like we've never have before. Water touches every single industry on the planet. That being said, there are a lot of places where we're taking water out quicker than we are putting it back. How do you see well drilling into the future, how we're using water currently?
Yeah. And I think, obviously we've all been in those situations where, we're going in and we're drilling wells that are deeper than what they were 20 years ago. And obviously those are concerns. So Montana is kind of an interesting place in terms of that. They're starting to kind of push some surface and subsurface rights. And so they're starting to kind of combine some of those things to be able to, make it more sustainable. But really, I think the big thing right now is making sure that we have the data in terms of how much water we're actually using compared to what's going in, and start to do that. So what we're doing at 180 is starting to monitor more, static water levels, pumping levels, and we're working all those things into our annual inspections. And so then we can start to kind of build that roadmap of what responsible use might look like. And so, as a water well driller, I think that being able to start to put those things together that says, man, static water level out here might not matter right now, but in 10, 15 years, if we can track that data, maybe we can get ahead of some of these issues that we could be having, or maybe there isn't an issue. And so I think the responsible thing to do as a water well professional is to start to collect that data and pay attention to that data, knowing that it's going to be important in the future. We don't exactly know what that's going to hold, but I think having the numbers is a good place to start.
How deep is too deep when it comes to drilling?
Oh, for us, 1,000 foot is kind of our cutoff. It seems like if every well was 200 foot, every customer would be happy. And, if it had all the water in the world, that'd be great. And sometimes that happens and sometimes it doesn't. And that's what's, tough about a water well driller. Everything you do is in the ground and it's hard to see. And so it forces you to be overly honest and open with your client. And so it's a interesting industry in terms of that, of like, nobody really gets to see your work. And so, you got to make sure your job site's clean and tidy and your well's painted nice with a pretty cap. And like, there's little things you can do, but really 99% of what we do is all underground that no one will see for 20 years. So it's a different industry in terms of that.
Now, you've done something I've heard people talk about doing in our industry, which is creating a franchise model. And I'm really curious about that because I haven't seen that done very much in our industry. So, one, how did you decide that you did want to do a franchise, and how are you making it successful?
Yeah, and the franchise side of things is kind of a long story. I mean, kind of the basis of it is, you started as a young man, you're like, I'm going to scale up my business. I'm going to grow this thing. We're going to go to 100 employees and 10 rigs and all of these things, right? And then you start down that path and I went to 2 locations and a few drill rigs and, probably 30, 35 employees was kind of my top. And, I just wasn't the best version of myself. It didn't allow me to be the best dad, the best husband, the best boss. It was too many things. It was too many moving parts. And like we've assembled a really great team here at Western Water Wells to be able to hopefully manage that as we see some growth with the franchise model. But really, I was sending my best guys to the worst projects, my worst guys to the best projects, and no one was happy. And so it became a kind of a constant struggle of like, how do you manage Ed where the customer gets the best service possible? The guys get to make that T-ball game at 5:00. They get to be the dad and the father and, the uncle and then the family guy that everybody wants us to be. How do we build all that into a package? And we came to the conclusion that it wasn't through employment, that, I can't keep track of Clayton's schedule and billings, but Clayton knows what his schedule and billings is. He had that conversation with his wife. And then to repeat that conversation with me and try to schedule that, it's just an unnecessary step. And so we ended up with the franchise model to, one, make sure that happens. And then two, I walked in the office one day and I had an office lady working for me that was our receptionist. And she was on the phone and she was diagnosing a customer's pump over the phone. And that was kind of a light came on, an aha moment for me in terms of, whoa, this is scalable. There's a pattern to this. What we're doing every day is recreatable. And so I always wanted to run a business with an equation, right? Like that's kind of the dream in business is they'll say, man, if I make X amount of dollars with one location and then I can put in X and I can open a second location or a second truck and just start to have that consistency across your pattern really makes business fun because you're like, hey, all I have to do is do this and then I make this. And like I always wanted that kind of fit in a box business. And I just didn't really see that capable with the way that current water well companies are ran. And so that's kind of where we came with the basis of like, wow, with 180, we can just open these across the nation with the right people on the bus. And so that's been really neat. And that's kind of how we came to that franchise model is it's a weird model. And I think the cool thing about it, and I think that makes it hard to sell, is that it sounds too good to be true. What do you mean? You're going to help me open my own business? I can make my own schedule. I make my own money. I handle everything. And you guys are just strictly support and make sure that I'm successful.
You know how to run your business. You were successful at that. How did you learn what you needed to do to package the franchise?
I think a lot of that is self-reflection with me. I'm a big self-reflection guy. I'm very dyslexic. So I see like the whole picture and then I kind of internalize it and figure out the parts. And for me, the mentorship is when I really was able to level up in terms of my career. So with the mentorship tied into the franchise model is really what we're trying to do. So we're trying to accomplish lots of mentorship so these guys can move up in their life. And so that's kind of the point of the franchise is to make sure that they have the support and the mentorship to really be able to scale up their business.
Hold on to your test kits, folks. We're going to take a quick break to hear from one of our sponsors. Today, I want to talk about a powerful ally in the fight against biofilm, AMSA. Here's the bottom line. Biocides alone just aren't enough to control biofilm. That's why AMSA's R&D team designed BCP products to work alongside biocides to create an effective biofilm control program. Whether you're dealing with oxidizing or non-oxidizing biocides, AMSA products are compatible and enhance their performance, helping to keep your system under control. But that's not all. AMSA BCP products are versatile. They can be used for aggressive offline cleaning, gradual online cleaning, or as part of a regular water treatment program to keep your cooling water systems clean long term. Whether you're dosing in a slug-based or continuous program, AMSA has you covered. AMSA products are your secret weapon in systems prone to fouling, like those with high ammonia levels, hydrocarbon contamination, or reclaim water. Because as we all know, AMSA's chemistry helps clean it up and keep it clean. Scaling Up Nation, if you're ready to take your biofilm control program to the next level, head over to scalinguph2o.com/AMSA to learn more about their innovative biofilm control program solutions. Once again, that's scalinguph2o.com/AMSA. Trust me, your cooling water systems will thank you. And now, back to our interview. I was on your website and I saw your core values spell out water. Did it just happen that way or did you make it happen that way?
Oh, everything good takes hard work. So, I mean, nothing comes easy, So, no, it wasn't quite natural, but I mean, we're definitely committed to the water. And so it's easy to tie those things in across our platforms.
How do you utilize your core values when you're talking to potential franchisees?
I think it comes back to kind of that employment stuff. When you have guys working for you, you want them to be a good, clean representation of yourself. And so that's kind of what we look for is people that, care about their clients, care about their communities, are heavily involved in being a good part of their community. They're at the T-ball games and they're really that person, that pillar in their small community. And so that's really kind of what we look for in terms of that. I mean, we can teach you guys how to do water well stuff, but those core values of being an awesome human are really what we want.
How do you go about finding potential franchisees?
You have to just be the best version of yourself. And then that awesome human attracts to more awesome humans is kind of what we found. And then it just kind of turns into a snowball effect. So a lot of our franchise guys are actually our best salesmen. They're telling their friends about it and they're saying, hey, you really ought to look at this. What they're doing over there is amazing. You should really, I know you live in Colorado, but I think this will work there. And so word of mouth is kind of our biggest driving factor right now. And, we're trying to grow slowly and responsibly. And so we're working on tailoring out into other companies that will help us with that mentorship side of things.
And I hear you're trying to hit 1,000 franchise locations.
Yeah, I think that's a wonderful life goal. You know what I mean? Like if we fall short at 700, I think we had a heck of a run. So 1,000 is kind of based on the knowledge of that's how many trucks we think we need to run to be able to fill the gap in the water well industry. And so that's not necessarily one of our goals. Obviously it's one of our goals, but it's not necessarily like we're trying to scale up to be this massive thing. No, we're trying to fill this gap in the market to make sure that our clients have access to clean and reliable drinking water. And that's our purpose.
What would you say the biggest problems are that are facing the water well industry today, and what is 180 Water doing to address these?
Yeah, so I'd say the biggest issue is that our knowledge base in that water well industry is in people that want to retire and are getting aged out of the industry. And so how do we wrap that up and make sure that we get all of that knowledge base out of their heads? Like what we talked about earlier in the podcast in terms of, man, this aquifer is depleting. Those guys know that and they have that information. And so we're trying to tie that back in. And so what we're doing at 180 is we're actually merging with different companies across the nation to kind of make a blueprint of what we've done so far. And so we're taking like these water well companies that, might want to be looking at retirement or other things or other options. And so we're actually tying them into 180 as an equity partner and we're merging with them. So they become a 180 location and they become like a hub. And so, the way that you do water wells in Florida might be different than what we do in Montana for obvious reasons. And so we take those guys with the knowledge in there and we give them a piece of the pie, we give them a seat at the table, and we put together a training program for that Southeast. And, we make sure that that's how we grow responsibly is so that our franchisees have a network, a regional hub that is close to them, that supports them and works with them and then understands the area. And so we're utilizing other water well companies for the data and the information that they want to pass along, packaging it up into 180, and then having them mentor our other franchisees.
So, if there was a company out there listening today, what are some of the biggest benefits for joining your franchise?
Yeah, I think a lot of that comes down to, the obvious stuff, we buy parts from the same suppliers. And if there's 100 companies buying parts from the same supplier, we're going to get a better deal. But I think a lot of it's the networking. You know what I mean? We've all been on that job where we just got our tails kicked. And it's really nice to be able to pick up the phone and say, hey, Jeff, how do I fix this? I'm so frustrated. I'm so down. Hey, don't worry. It happens to all of us. This is what we need to do. And this is how we collect that problem. And so I think like a big part of that is just the mentorship and being a part of a group that can really move forward and, help you scale your business and help you grow in the best version possible.
Our listeners are in the industrial water treatment industry. So if they're in a different space and they want to start a franchise model, what advice would you have for them?
It's a long road. Like we were just talking about that the other day. I was driving back with our CFO. And I think one of the great things about my career is that if I had any clue what I was doing when I started, I would have never done
Yeah, I think everybody says that, right?
So we were visiting about that with the franchise model yesterday. Like, man, I don't have any idea how much work this is going to be or how long this would take. Like, it's a grind, you know what I mean? To find the right people, put them on the right bus, get them trained up, get them open. Like, it is a grind, And so, it's a long road. Just be prepared for that. But it's so rewarding to watch these guys come through the door and change their whole life. It's just incredible. And then all of a sudden, you got a 180 truck in the Christmas parade in a town that's 4 hours away and customers calling because they had excellent service and watching them go from 0 reviews to 30 in the first 2 months. The rewards are there. And so just put on your patience game and enjoy the ride because it's amazing to watch these guys and how successful they're being and how much difference they're making in their communities.
You mentioned you grew up working on a ranch. What are some lessons learned on the ranch that you carry forward in business today?
Accountability. That's the biggest one. You'll see that all the time with me. We drilled a well that was about 40 feet from where the customer wanted it. And I have to call him today and have a conversation that we just drilled him a free well and we'll get it taken care of. And I know that's not where you wanted it. And it's totally fine. It would be fine there, but it's not where we wanted it. So he can either have the option of keeping that well or we'll move it. And so I just think that accountability in terms of coming back full circle and just really being honest and open with your clients. I mean, they know what's going on. It's just easier to just tell them. And so I think that accountability is there because, I mean, if you don't get your chores done on the farm, things don't eat. And so it's important to make sure that you can be counted on.
For people listening today that do own wells, what are some tips, what's some advice you have for them in maintaining them properly?
Yeah, so we highly recommend an annual inspection. There's just a lot of little cheap parts, not really like cheap in terms of like they don't do their job, but they fail. Pressure switches, pressure tanks, air in tanks. There's lots of things that we check to make sure that it lasts as long as possible. And so obviously an annual inspection is great, or even a biannual inspection is going to save you in the long run. You know, at 180 here, we've put together a package that is a 10-year warranty that's built into that inspection because we believe, you know, if we maintain your system properly, that we can get that life out of it. So we want to stand behind our work. And so that's been kind of a key part is kind of being able to get it up to scale to be able to diagnose the small problems with systems and then be able to go in and solve them.
Where do you see the water well industry going in, say, the next 15, 20 years?
Oh, I think we're going to have a lot of turnover in terms of companies. You know, I think a lot of our industry, I think it's almost 60% of them are at or near retirement age. So like we hear that story across the nation in terms of workforce, but the water well industry is 10 years ahead of that workforce study that we're seeing in the nation. And I think that that's, you know, barriers to entry and some other things that, you know, you get in later, you stay in longer. But we're at that kind of pivotal point where we need that knowledge base out of these guys that are maybe want to be out in 5 years or 10 years. Because what we don't want is we don't want Joe Blow down the street trying to do what we do. You know, I mean, we're water well professionals and we're really good at what we do. And we want to make sure that we can offer that to clients. We don't want them calling their neighbor because nobody can get there for 2 weeks and they need water. And so we don't want our groundwater sources going to backyard and garden stuff. We want it to be done by professionals and make sure that it's done responsibly.
Jack, if somebody listening wants to find out more about what it is that you do, what should they do?
You know, I think our website's probably a great resource and reach out to us there. I mean, you're going to get a call back from one of us and probably within 24 hours. I mean, we're Johnny on the spot. So don't be afraid to ask. I mean, even if you're just in business and, you know, like what you hear here or want to ask me some questions, we're available. And, you know, we're here to help and that's our mission.
I'll make sure to put all that contact information on our show notes page. I do have a few lightning round questions for you if you're ready for those.
Heck yeah.
So if you could go back in time and talk to your former self on your very first day as a business owner, what advice would you give yourself?
Oh, man, that's a tough question. I mean, I would love to tell myself the secret to moving forward, but I mean, I think that human that I was back then is the same guy I am today. And so I think just be true to yourself and keep moving forward. And everything happens for a reason, I think is the biggest thing where we're at now in terms of just total blind faith. You know, the bad, the good, the ugly, it all happens for a reason.
What are some of your favorite books?
Oh, I'm a big built to sell guy. I love Freakonomics. You know, just kind of business books is really what I'm into. Built to Sell is a great one. You know, we did a lot of stuff out of there in terms of our bonus structure at Western Water Wells came from there. And it's kind of a goofy little short read, but it's one of my favorites.
When Hollywood makes a movie about Jack Clark, who do you want playing yourself?
Oh, probably Jack Nicholson.
All right. There we go.
Yeah, I just kind of, I mean, if my hair gets a little long, we look kind of similar. So I don't know. It was my mom's favorite actor growing up. So he always kind of made me laugh.
My last question, if you had the ability to talk to anybody throughout history, who would it be with and why?
You know, in my water well studies, there was some guys that drilled a 6,000-foot water well in China with a cable tool. And I think it would be really interesting to visit with them because, I mean, the obstacles that they had to overcome had to have been amazing. Those guys have came through those hard times, difficult times. I mean, it took generations to do that water well, and they were so determined. And so somebody with that kind of determination, if not them guys.
Well, Jack Clark of 180 Water, thanks for joining us on the podcast.
Well, thanks for having me.
Well, Jack, thanks again for coming on the Scaling Up H2O podcast. And nation, I really believe that the backbone of our country is small business, is entrepreneurship. And I want to celebrate that today on 4th of July, our nation's holiday, and I think it's appropriate to celebrate one of the strongest things within our nation, and it's so many people that own businesses within this country. So, nation, to all the entrepreneurs out there, thank you for all the things that you do. For all the people that own water treatment companies out there, thank you for not only making this industry better, but for at some point in time, taking the leap to start your own firm. I know that is one of the scariest things that you will ever do because that's what I did. And for all of those out there that did that, thank you for that because we are all raising the bar within the water treatment industry. Now, something I've always wondered about doing, because we all think we have a great company, what if we actually created a franchise model and now our water treatment company could be all over the world or all over the country or wherever we would set it up? And that's exactly what Jack did, and I was fascinated by that. If you're a long-term listener of this show, you know that one of my first jobs as a teenager was working at McDonald's, and that was all about processes and procedures because they had a corporate office and then they had all these people that were franchisees that owned the business, but they were franchisees, which means they had to run that specifically the way that McDonald's told them that they had to run it. Now, why would somebody give up independence like that? Because McDonald's had a model that was successful. They've proven to that, and people would buy into that, and they would duplicate that model. I've always been fascinated by that. And I've always thought it'd be interesting to do that in water treatment. And of course, Jack is doing that with well drilling and just a really interesting story. We're going to have more information about Jack's company on our show notes page. You can check out his core values and all the things that we talked about simply by going to scalinguph2o.com and checking out this show notes page. Well, Scaled Up Nation, now I am going to transport you 250 years in the past. It was actually 250 years ago that Patrick Henry gave his famous "Give Me Liberty or Give Me Death" speech. That was delivered on March 23rd, 1775 at St. John's Church in my hometown of Richmond, Virginia. And I want to say, when I grew up in Richmond, Virginia, my elementary school did a great job of making sure that we knew about history, but specifically all the things that took place locally. And we would go on field trips to see these places. And St. John's Church is located right on top of Church Hill. And I have been there several times, and this is where this speech was given. And it was an old church, of course, no air conditioning. And back 250 years ago, this place was packed with representatives of the Second Virginia Convention. Now, if you can imagine, all these people were gathered together to figure out if they were going to go to war with England. And most of the people there did not want to go to war with England. And Patrick Henry was in the audience, and he listened to all of these people get up and say why they should not go to war with England. Now, there were probably some pro-war with England's sparsed throughout there, but the majority was saying, no, we need to try to work this out. We need to not go to war with England. So if you can, just transport your mind's eye back there. Think of this going on. And there were notable figures in that audience like George Washington and Thomas Jefferson. So he's listening to all of these speeches, and finally, he could not take any more. And people that have written about this said that he got up with a fire in him, and he started speaking. And this is what he said. This is me reading Patrick Henry's speech, "Give me liberty or give me death." No man thinks more highly than I do of the patriotism as well as abilities of the very worthy gentlemen who have just addressed the House. But different men often see the same subject in different lights, and therefore I hope it will not be thought disrespectful to those gentlemen if, entertaining as I do opinions of a character very opposite to theirs, I shall speak forth my sentiments freely and without reserve. This is no time for ceremony. The question before the House is one of awful moment to this country. For my own part, I consider it as nothing less than a question of freedom or slavery, and in proportion to the magnitude of the subject ought to be the freedom of the debate. It is only in this way that we can hope to arrive at truth and fulfill the great responsibility which we hold to God and our country. Mr. President, it is natural to man to indulge in the illusions of hope. We are apt to shut our eyes against a painful truth and listen to the song of that siren till she transforms us into beasts. Is this the part of wise men engaged in a great and arduous struggle for liberty? Are we disposed to be of the number of those who, having eyes, see not, and having ears, hear not, the things which so nearly concern their temporal salvation? For my part, whatever anguish of spirit it may cost, I am willing to know the whole truth, to know the worst and to provide for it. I have but one lamp by which my feet are guided, and that is the lamp of experience. I know of no way of judging of the future but by the past. And judging by the past, I wish to know what there has been in the conduct of the British ministry for the last 10 years to justify those hopes with which gentlemen have been pleased to solace themselves and the House. Sir, we have done everything that could be done to avert the storm which is now coming on. We have petitioned, we have remonstrated, we have supplicated, we have prostrated ourselves before the throne and have implored its interposition to arrest the tyrannical hands of the ministry and Parliament. Our petitions have been slighted, our remonstrances have produced additional violence and insult, our supplications have been disregarded, and we have been spurned with contempt from the foot of the throne. There is no longer any room for hope if we wish to be free, if we mean to preserve inviolate those inestimable privileges for which we have been so long contending, if we mean not basely to abandon the noble struggle in which we have been so long engaged, in which we have pledged ourselves never to abandon until the glorious object of our contest shall be obtained. We must fight. I repeat it, sir, we must fight. An appeal to arms and to the God of hosts is all that is left us. Sir, we are not weak if we make a proper use of those means which the God of nature hath placed in our power. The millions of people armed in the holy cause of liberty and in such a country as that which we possess are invincible by any force which our enemy can send against us. Besides, sir, we shall not fight our battles alone. There is a just God who presides over the destinies of nations and who will raise up friends to fight our battles for us. The battle, sir, is not to the strong alone. It is to the vigilant, the active, the brave. Besides, sir, we have no election. If we were base enough to desire it, it is now too late to retire from the contest. There is no retreat but in submission and slavery. Our chains are forged. Their clanking may be heard on the plains of Boston. The war is inevitable, and let it come. I repeat it, sir, let it come. It is in vain, sir, to extenuate the matter. Gentlemen may cry, peace, peace, but there is no peace. The war is actually begun. The next gale that sweeps from the north will bring to our ears the clash of resounding arms. Our brethren are already in the field. Why stand we here idle? What is it that gentlemen wish? What would they have? Is life so dear or peace so sweet as to be purchased at the price of chains and slavery? Forbid it, Almighty God. I know not what course others may take, but as for me, give me liberty or give me death. Nation, I know I did not give this speech justice, but my hope was just so you could hear it. A lot of people have probably not heard that speech in its entirety. And if you read biographies from Patrick Henry, people will say how moved they were, how this sparked people to do something. And they said that this is what got Virginia into promoting that, yes, we need to do something, we need to go to war. And this is how the Revolutionary War started, at least for Virginia. And it's one of the most powerful orations in history. If you go to law school, this is one of the speeches that they study for all the things that it covers. One of the many things that this speech is studied for is ethos, pathos, and logos. Ethos is the ethical appeal, focusing on the credibility and character of the speaker. Pathos is the emotional appeal, aiming to persuade the audience by evoking their emotions. And logos is the logical appeal, using reason and evidence to convince the audience of something. So we can hear in this speech that Henry establishes his credibility by showing respect for all the other opposing viewpoints and presenting himself as a patriotic and trustworthy figure. He appeals through his emotions by using very vivid, very powerful metaphors, using urgent language, aiming to stir the audience to action and highlight the dire consequences if they were not to act. And finally, logos. Henry uses logical arguments referencing historical events and British actions to justify his call for armed resistance. So in addition to that, there's so many rhetoric devices there. The structuring and the framing, there's a call to action. I did not do the best job with tone and delivery. There is so much that can be studied from this speech. But something that I just want to highlight is these men had everything to lose, but they also knew what they had to gain. And I just think that that is amazing that we have people in our history that really formed the nation that we have today. And no, they were not perfect. And I know we have a tendency to judge how we look at issues morally and conscionably today, back then. And it seems of late, a lot of places are removing history because of things that people did in the past. And one wrong act really makes it so all the acts kind of disappear. And I want to caution of that because I am a student of history. I actually love history. And especially when you study what happened in our country, there are so many wrongs that we have corrected. And there are a lot of wrongs that have been corrected by people who were doing that wrong. If we just totally erase that history because of the wrong, I fear that we are doomed to repeat it because we don't have the reference that it happened before and that it was wrong when it happened before. And because it was wrong when it happened before and we knew it happened, we know that we will never repeat that again. So what am I trying to say? History is a great thing. I think we do need to put things into context, but above all else, I really hope that on today, July 4th, we realize that we have way more in common with each other than we do our differences. And the next time somebody says something that maybe you don't agree with, and maybe it starts getting you upset, I want you to look at that getting upset is maybe not the best reaction because maybe they have some information that you don't have. And you already have the information that you have. So what do you have to lose by asking questions? Okay, I don't agree with this person, but I'm curious why they think that way. So instead of being judgmental, I'm going to be curious and I'm going to ask questions. And who knows? By them answering your questions, you may learn something that you didn't know. You might change a particular viewpoint you have, and now you have a better understanding of what is going on in its entirety. We're never going to know everything in its entirety, but we can get more information about it. So that is my hope. That's my July 4th wish for everybody listening to this podcast, that we don't go into conversations with judgment. We go into conversations with curiosity. And when that curiosity maybe goes back to judgment, remember that we have more in common than we have differences between each other. And it's because of that that we need to engage in conversations even more, because when we do that, we are learning. And when we're learning, we're making ourselves better. We're making other people better. And folks, we are making this industry better. Happy July 4th, Scaling Up Nation. I hope you have a fantastic day. Lift others as you rise. At the Rising Tide Mastermind, we say a rising tide raises all boats. We believe in the power of helping others to achieve their goals. By supporting your peers, you also grow. Join a group where mutual success is the ultimate goal. To find out more, go to scalinguph2o.com/mastermind. Once again, that's scalinguph2o.com/mastermind.